How's it going, doggy people? I hope you all are doing well. Got my little man Hermes here. He's not part of this video, but he just wanted to say hi and make an appearance. And probably really just wants to climb on this thing behind me. So we'll let him go wander and be wild. But today I wanted to talk about how I would go about... That's him playing in his tunnel, so don't mind that, but the life of a ferret owner. I want to talk about how I would personally work with a dog who is showing signs of resource guarding. If you don't know what that means, it means that anything that is a resource to a dog, usually food, toys, bedding, mates, or potential mates, even if your dog is neutered or spayed, a person, attention, those can be resources for a dog. So say a bone, if you have one bone and two dogs, the bone is a resource and one dog protected over the other dog. Using acts of aggression, even very mild aggression, it could be signs of staring a dog down, showing the teeth a little bit, a low growl, hovering over the bone, getting very stiff, showing hackles, raised tail. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full-on fight. So now that we understand a little bit about what resource guarding is, we want to understand why resource guarding happens. So if this sounds like an issue that you may be dealing with, or this is an interesting video topic for you, then stay tuned and let's get started. So now that we know what resource guarding is, we need to find out why dogs do it. What's the underlying cause of it? Because dogs don't just do it just to be a jerk, okay? They're not. People say dogs are selfish, which is true. Any living creature is selfish, okay? If we have the ability to do it, we will do it. Dogs don't have that mental capacity of thinking of guilt or being the better person or whatnot. They just do it because they can or they can't. They do it because it's rewarding, or they don't do it because it's not rewarding or it's punishing. So if a dog is resource guarding, in the case I'm talking about, a friend of mine reached out asking for some guidance on his two English bulldogs. One, which is the younger male, who is not neutered yet, has shown signs of resource guarding in the past. And how they personally dealt with it, they smacked the dog on the nose. Now, this is not, any personal attack on anybody. If you do that, it's a very common behavior. People will correct that behavior thinking that we are putting a stop to it, when actually it ends up making the behavior worse. So I do not recommend ever punishing or correcting any kind of aggressive or seemingly aggressive behavior, such as your dog growling or snapping at another dog. We need to understand that we as humans put them in this situation, and so we don't need to allow it, but we need to figure out how to prevent it. So in this case, there's the two dogs eating, in the same general area. They're separated, I guess. There's enough room, but not enough room to where the male English bulldog that was eating snapped at the older female bulldog, and she didn't, take that kindly, of course, understandable, especially being bulldogs, and so they got into a fight. They tried to break it up, and injury occurred to one of the owners. So, pretty serious redirection of the male English bulldog. So this can be a pretty scary situation. So I recommended to them that they find a positive reinforcement or force-free specific dog trainer in their area to help them with this in person, because I'm going to be giving you some tips here, but it's a little different when I'm not there in person to be able to catch every little bit of body language or the timing or the moment. So I'm going to give you some tips, but this doesn't mean that this will necessarily fix your issue, but things that you can learn about from these tips that I may be able to help you with. And if you're having issues like this, then I do recommend that you look for a positive reinforcement trainer, force-free, specifically titled trainer in your area to help with this specific behavior, because it can be very dangerous, as we've seen in the scenario listed, which is a real deal thing. So with all that history going on, why did the male bulldog feel the need to correct the other dog? Why did they feel the need to protect their resource? It's a natural occurrence. The dog could have been, it could be a learned behavior, it could be psychological, it could be pain, that they're just irritated, they don't want anybody near their food. Usually with resource guarding, it's a learned behavior. Very few puppies start out being very aggressive guarding their food. So in the case of this little guy who's been eating and he shows like, hey, back away from my food, and then you correct it in any kind of way, but specifically with a physical altercation of putting your hand on the nose, which is a very sensitive part of the body for dogs. I mean, people too. But smacking the nose or doing these old school type corrections, you teach the dog that you don't teach the dog to not resource guard, because we're not taking care of the emotional state behind that, the reasoning why they're doing it. We are simply putting a Band-Aid on it, so to speak, and only taking care of the symptoms. We're not taking care of the root problem. So he snaps, you smack him on the face, he says, okay, next time I'm not going to snap or growl, I'm going to make contact, or say he's just growling or hovering, and you smack him on the nose and say, no, stop it, knock it off, whatever. And the dog says, okay, I won't do it either with this person nearby, I won't do it with this specific person, I'm not going to show the symptoms, but eventually it's going to bottle up because we're not taking care of the root problem, why the dog feels unsafe, which is really what it is, the need that they feel the need to protect their food because maybe they feel like they haven't been eating enough. Maybe they've, as puppies, which sometimes it can happen. I know a specific corgi that he's very focused on food and protecting his food because growing up he didn't get enough because the breeder that was feeding him and his 7 sisters fed them all in one bowl, just one pile of food, and they all kind of fought over it. So that can be, teaching, mental, psychological issues that the dog may feel the need to protect their food because they don't know when their next meal is going to come, even though it comes scheduled. It's just the dog doesn't know that. So that could be the case. I mean, it could be any number of reasons, but really we want to understand that generally it comes from fear and just he feels the need to protect his food. He doesn't feel safe. Whether if I am as a human walk by his bowl and he growls and protects it, he's afraid it's going to go away, or another dog comes over because maybe he's afraid he's going to be pushed off the food and he won't have it. So I don't know what the history is with that. At this point, it really doesn't matter, but I'm just going to be giving you some tips about how I would handle that. So if he's the first instance that you see of protecting food, we don't want to correct it because, again, we stop the symptoms, but we don't stop the root cause. And then it's just a ticking time bomb. Eventually he stops growling and you get too close and you don't read the signs that he's stiff and his pupils are dilating and the whites of his eyes show and ears go back and whatnot. And then he just goes for a bite, and it can be a very aggressive bite. It can be a latch on, or it could just be a bite that just breaks the skin and you're bleeding everywhere. So when we have this behavior showing, no matter how aggressive or how far the dog takes it, if I walk by a dog's bowl or another dog walks by a dog's bowl and they hover and they start growling, they stop eating, they hold their breath, I say, okay, this is we need to work on this. This is the first thing, my priority of working on it. Don't worry about the sits and downs and walking on leash. So how am I going to handle that? Well, first, I recommended to this gentleman and his family, feed the dogs, and if it's dog-on-dog reactivity, you want to feed them in separate rooms and give them space so that the male dog or whoever the resource guarder is, feels comfortable to be able to eat their food in peace. They don't have to protect it. They don't have to reinforce and practice this behavior. If you cannot feed them in different rooms, then I suggest having at least 10 feet between the bowls of the 2 dogs, at least, minimum. If that doesn't work and the dog is still guarding, and even with that, you want to have supervision, always supervision. If you can have 2 people, perfect, 1 supervise each dog. You only have 1 person, I suggest that you supervise the resource guarder. And just watch and make sure that they're not going to, go after the other dog. You may have to have a puppy pen in between them, a baby gate. You may have to have the resource guarder on a harness and a leash and a loose leash. We don't want to add more tension to them by having a tight leash. The leash is just there to keep them from getting to the other dog, if that happens. It's best if you can separate them into 2 different rooms or feed them in a crate if the dog is crate trained and they're comfortable in there. Just feed them their meals in there and they can feel perfectly safe in there, eat their food at their own time, at their own pace, and let them out when they're ready and pick up the bowl so that way, even if the bowl is empty, some dogs will go and protect that. So the bowl is a draw. I call it a draw, but it's a resource that can also cause altercation. So pick up the bowls and teach the dogs, first of all, prevention. Now we're going to get into how I would actually work with the dogs who are resource guarding. For dog-on-dog resource guarding, prevention obviously is key. The next step you can do along with that prevention I mean we're preventing the dog from practicing the behavior of guarding his food or feeling the need to guard his food. And it's really important that we understand that he feels the need to do that. For whatever reason, dogs are sentient beings. They have emotions and feelings. So correcting is, in my opinion, not an option. We don't want to correct this behavior. We want to prevent it and instead counter-condition that with a different response. So we teach the dog that no matter what's going on around him, he can feel comfortable that nothing's going to take his food away. How I would do that is with two dogs. We would have this dog over here just being nice and calm, make sure they're not looking at the resource guarder. We would also really try to get the resource guarder to be able to focus on me. If they look at the other dog, I want to make sure I break it before they start staring too long. So if they're eating their food and they look at the other dog, they can go back to eating. I can add a little bit, maybe a treat or something into their food and make it more positive that they look away from that dog. I might start with just a couple of pieces of kibble in their bowl and then wait for them to look at me, because looking at me is better than staring at the other dog. You may not even have the other dog in the room at that point, but just have them eating and really comfortable with being able to focus on looking at you, and that way there's no other distraction over here that keeps them from being able to look at you. So when they can do that, they can look at you. You can have the other dog over there just sitting or just being calm, relaxed. We don't want them staring at each other, because again, that can add to tension. The other dog is just chilling, doing whatever, being a little potato, and this guy is able to, he can look, and he can look away, perfect, and he can eat his food, he can look at me, excellent, he's going to get a little treat. Then we can start, feeding the other dog, a couple pieces of kibble. That might set him off, so we want to be aware that if we give this one a little bit of food, watch his body language. Does he get more tense? If so, we need to slow it down to where we either increase distance, which is usually your friend when you have reactivity or fear. We need to slow down. So if he gets nervous when you're feeding the other dog, either increase distance or really up your reward, or go back to really practicing that, hey, he can look at you even with the other dog in the room, even with the other dog next to an empty bowl. Of course, we want to make sure the other dog is comfortable. So maybe feed them at separate times so this dog isn't antsy and leading this guy to be more antsy. You can try feeding them separately and then practice with just a couple of treats or something after they've eaten, or giving them half their food already so they're not starving. We don't want them to be hyperactive because they're already hungry, and then you get hangry. I become a grumpy bear when I'm hungry. So, again, think about ways you want to prevent your dog from becoming anxious or nervous or upset. And things are going to happen. You won't always get it right, and that happens. So we want to try our best to prevent it and keep everybody safe. That's why I highly recommend that you get somebody who is experienced in this and specifically force-free, who can work with you in your own home. Specifically in the home is easier than at a facility because your dogs don't act the same way at the facility. But if you can get someone like that, again, force-free, positive reinforcement, none of these balance trainers, certainly no compulsion trainers, nobody who's going to punish this behavior. Have them come in and work with you, and they can see, and ask for whatever their credentials are and how long, if they are experienced in it, and if at any point you feel that you're uncomfortable with whatever methods they're using, you have the right to stop training with them. You have the right to protect your dog. You always have the right to remove consent for them working with your dog. Okay, be an advocate for your dog's safety and well-being. So if you're just working on this and your dog is really not a super bad case, they just kind of look at the dog and they get a little bit nervous, then you can start feeding them again in the space. Have your dog be able to eat, and then over time he should be able to feel comfortable eating, and he won't even notice the other dog because he doesn't feel the need to protect his food. He can look at you, he sees you as a really good source. You may choose to, I wouldn't necessarily push it. You may choose to, if you want to, move the dogs slowly closer and closer together. For me, I don't see a point in doing that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If we get them comfortable like that, there's no sense in overdoing it. Unless you have a really busy family and there's a lot of foot traffic, I would suggest where you feed the dog might be a bad position. So if your dog is eating in an area like, say, this hallway, and there's a lot of foot traffic, it's probably not going to be very comfortable. Just like if you feed your dog in a laundry room or in a corner, they feel cornered. They don't feel safe. Where you feed your dog is also very important. If they're out in the open, some dogs don't feel comfortable. Same thing with like cats, for instance, where you put the litter box. Is it really far away for an elderly cat, or is it in an area they don't feel safe in? So think like a dog, and think specifically like your dog, because you know your dog best. Their personality. Think about maybe moving where you feed their food. Again, check health-wise, make sure that there's nothing else going on. They could have a sore tooth that makes them more irritable. They could have certain things going on internally. Always check that out with your vet before starting any major training, because that can also make things a little more difficult or a little more uncomfortable for your dog. Even if you're using force training, it may not help. The training may not completely help if your dog is, say, just irritable because they have, they're in pain. So I hope a few of these tips helped. Main thing to walk away from this is give your dogs space, give them distance between each other. If you have to feed them in the same room, at least 10 feet between the dogs, and always supervise, especially the resource guarder. Do not correct any resource guarding. Even if they snap at the other dog, just take the dogs and walk them away. Don't say anything. Take them if you can. If you're worried about an altercation happening, then have either a baby gate or some kind of wall between the dogs, even if like a foldable table or something, or have a harness and a leash, a 6-foot leash on the resource guarder, but you don't need to have a death grip on it, because even if they lunge, if they're 10 feet away and the resource guarder only gets 6 feet from that, they're still safe. And then you can take that and just walk them into a different room. Let them calm down. Don't say anything. Don't correct them. Don't pop them with the leash. Just put them in there. Let them calm down. Maybe give them their food in that different room, or move the other dog and have them come back and eat their food. And then, work on, okay, we need distance. We need to work one-on-one with this dog, just being able to really focus on me and be really comfortable. So maybe feeding the dogs at separate times might help. Of course, overall, make sure the dog is comfortable and healthy. Maybe check them out at the vet. If you really are in a pickle, then I would say definitely look into a force-free, positive reinforcement specific. I try to avoid using the term only, but because we can't, it's impossible to use positive reinforcement only, but someone who doesn't specifically correct the dog for this behavior. Look for somebody like that who is educated, someone who is experienced in this specific behavior. Look for that in your area and try to see if they can work with you on this. Again, you're looking for someone who doesn't correct it, someone who doesn't tell your dog, no or anything like that. And if you have to, then just feed your dogs. If you can feed them in separate rooms, that's probably best to do it until you can really get a handle of these things. Or you may not ever get a handle, and that's okay. Your dog, if you have a resource guarder, there's nothing wrong with them just eating in a safe space, and we're cool with that. If they're a resource guarder with other dogs, we can separate them. They're not necessarily trying to kill each other, but being predators, they cause more damage than, say, like a prey animal would. If you have, I don't know, 2 turtles. I don't know if they're really considered prey animals, but they'll just kind of bump each other. They're not going to kill each other. They'll just bump into each other, but they don't really care. But like a horse, say, they'll bite and kick each other, but they're not going to try and kill each other. Predators won't necessarily try to kill each other either, at least dogs in this case, but they can cause more damage. So just be aware of that. And if you have a dog that's resource guarding with humans, that's a whole other issue, I would say, and I can talk more on that in the future if anybody's interested in on that. If that is the case, then you definitely want, just as much as this case with 2 dogs, someone in your area to help you in person. Because again, the tips I give, I can't see every little millisecond of interaction between the dogs, between the people, where the dog is eating. There's so many other questions that I can't answer. But these are just tips, general tips that I can give you that hopefully will help you. Prevention is best. If you need to feed the dogs in separate rooms, it's probably best to just be able to do that. Maybe feed them at different times, and always supervise eating or feedings. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped a little bit. I hope this was able to answer some questions. Of course, if you have more questions for me, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to answer those. So let me know if any of this helped you out. I hope it did, and even if it didn't, then hey, that's cool too. Always look for someone in your area that can help you in person. So thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Until next time, stay positive.